that seems to drive the actions as a result of that national policy seem to be the idea of maximizing the potential collection of the water resource that falls over the entire island with some numbers. Of course, not all of them may be feasible for different reasons, but the most possible ones are 23.9 cubic kilometers, 75% coming from surface waters, 25% from groundwater, roughly. With just about a fraction of that being available. That meaning being available because the infrastructure is in place, regardless of the quality of that infrastructure and the quality of the operation, etc., etc. An inventory was shown that shows some interesting facts about what the system may be in place, but in terms of storage, that is a very important aspect. In fact, that is a tremendous difference between Florida and Cuba, because they can store. We can't. Remember what I said, we are on the table. Our best storage is the groundwater. For us, storage is the Biscayne Aquifer. So they have about 239 reservoirs, most of them in Camagüey, which can store just about a fraction of the available water resources, but not enough for a situation that includes streams. 730 small dams, small hydroelectric power plants to supply primarily rural communities, and water supply, which includes what you will find in the infrastructure in the cities, and then also looking at water supply, which is a key aspect, and what Mr. Cueto was referring to with much detail, the aspects of wastewater treatment and final disposal of what is better, the reuse and recovery of the water in cycles. Existing problems, I found documentation that pretty much identifies everything that needs to be done in there. And I have two slides here with a very detailed long list, pretty much reaffirming some of the comments made by Mr. Cueto, including the tariff system, the subsidies of water. Very interesting people in the management and accountabilities. And one major challenge that they have, which they cannot control, and that is stressors that result in droughts, major priority as I see it from records, as well as flooding. And this is also especially variable over the entire length of the island. I'm going to skip some of this just to move a little bit farther. So what I could sense from my findings is that there are actions that are being taken along the lines of the water, at least under this, the writing, the text of the national policy. And that is expanded into quality by what is the responsibility under a different type of legislation, which is the environmental law of 1997, by MAA. This is in Spanish. Español, meaning la Agencia del Medio Ambiente, the environmental agency. Stressors, just finishing, which are very challenging, but they are also challenging for us. They are challenging for anybody in the Caribbean environment, all the way to New York. If we remember saying, the flooding and the droughts is a region of streams, tropical storms and hurricanes, the saline intrusion, the anthropogenic, the one connected to climate change drivers, the overexploitation of aquifers, and of course water contamination, which is a whole different chapter for which I will not have time to talk about, but I did manage to get the two last laws of environmental protection. And with this, just say that yes, to answer the question that was posed to me, there are needs from infrastructure, rehabilitation, upgrading, operation, environmental monitoring, which carries on infrastructure, and the development of human resources, informal education, continuing, and training. Those are some of my references, and I thank you, and I'm sorry for taking a few extra minutes here for your time, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Fuentes. And next is Dr. Giorgio Taviek with Applied Research Center at FIU.
Yes, thank you very much. The topic is about the future infrastructure, and I'll provide a brief discussion about a topic I believe we're very familiar with, hear frequently about it, sustainability and green infrastructure. As much as we talk about how much infrastructure is lagging and there are needs to do additional infrastructure, which requires lots of engineering and lots of funding, there is quite a bit of things that can be done with through green infrastructure. And of course, it has to be applied in the right place. For example, in urban environment, you need to go with very highly engineered systems, very highly expensive and high-cost systems, just because of the high density of the population and the requirements to have such an infrastructure. However, in rural environments, you don't have pretty much the funding to create extensive infrastructure. You need to find ways to implement green infrastructure concept. And they are important for, in particular when I talk about green infrastructure, a very important component is stormwater management. Stormwater management can be done with reduced cost by introducing lots of components that not only through engineering, and these not only reduce the cost, but we also have improved infiltration from rainfall through the and recharge of the aquifer, which are very important parameters for improving the environment. In addition, different green infrastructure solutions, they don't typically fall in any regulatory aspects, and typically engineers have to come up with solutions locally, how to implement them to improve the environment, reduce the erosion, improve the water quality. And these are some of the aspects that we have to also take into consideration. One of the biggest issues is always the development. And for example, in the 1800s, Cuba has been probably about 80% undeveloped according to data. And currently only 14% are undeveloped. The development of different urban areas have introduced also lots of aspects of soil erosion, salinization of the plains, and many more different problems. Also, agricultural activities decrease the environmental water quality aspects of the water. And these are factors that have to be taken into consideration. So Cuba must focus on has to refocus on environmental issues to ensure that future development will not additionally deteriorate the environment. And future development, I had a just brief discussion. I have a group of students from UM, and our discussion was Cuba is actually kind of lucky it has been so far behind the time in a lot of aspects of development and redevelopment that their cities are kind of focused, and their cities impact less the environment compared to our cities. For example, Miami, if you look at the sprawl that Miami has, and all of the sprawl that introduces a lot of impervious areas, which is not really positive about the aquifer, about the recharge, about the natural hydrological cycle. All the man-made activities that introduce impervious surfaces like roads, they affect significantly the the natural hydrological cycle where you have water, rainfall that has to infiltrate the ground, and it has to stay for years in the ground where there is a natural purification capacities of the subsurface. And also it provides sources for withdrawals. It's a subsurface. The subsurface is a natural huge reservoir. If you think about this, the subsurface has about, let's say, 40% porosity. So any of the surface underneath us contains about 40% water. And if you interrupt this cycle, then through some kind of, let's say, roads, highways, which is one of the, or development that has lots of pavement, then you interrupt this natural cycle. And again, this, of course, for urban planning, you have to, when you do the urban planning, you don't have a choice. You need to introduce lots of impervious surfaces, but you cannot apply the same urban planning concepts in the rural areas. And I think that's one of the aspects that Cuba must refocus on, how to protect the environment through engineer solutions that are applied in a context-sensitive way. You cannot apply the same engineering infrastructure in the suburban area as you do in urban areas. And so these are briefly the aspects that I believe that are important. And with this I will conclude, and if you have any questions, I will be glad to answer. There is a lot more, of course, to these aspects, but I believe that green infrastructure has to be very strongly present in any of the future, any future planning or engineering decisions that will be made. That's it.
We will have his questions at the end of the section. And next we have Mr. Eduardo Vega with Miami-Dade Water and Sewer Department.
Let me look my niece won't help here. Yeah, I have a presentation. First, let me thank Dr. Duani and FIU for the invitation. It's marvelous. I had spent a marvelous time here, believe me. Let me give you a background how I came up with this presentation. I had done, I cannot tell you, done a lot of research, but I had done some research. I have relied on some of the papers that have been prepared by colleagues and scientists, including Jose and by osmosis. Probably I looked into them also presentation before, and based on that and my experience working for a utility company, what I'm trying to give you is a perspective of the operation of the Cuban water utility company, and try to, in a way, see the way we manage a utility company, the way we look for performance in a utility company, and the way, or the perspective that I have based on the research that I have made on the Cuban operation, which in reality I don't know who is in charge of that. Apparently the institute, all you made references just to collect data. So in reality I don't know who is responsible to operate the water infrastructure in Cuba. This is not working. And we're probably not hinted to the right place, or maybe one of the things. Okay, here we go. I think that you have seen a lot of this data before, but look at my first bullet. There is limited data in reality, at least in my experience, to fairly evaluate the current water and wastewater infrastructure in Cuba. I want to make a fair evaluation. So, you know, the population is 11 million, 11.2. The water demand is about 20 million cubic meters per day. The majority of the water is used in the agricultural area. Waters, you have 69% in agriculture, you have industrial 12%, and domestic 19%. I think that this in a way coincides with the data that I've seen in your reports. Water service. And I think in general they have done a good work. So water potable service provided to about 95% of the population. Now, 75% is the only one that have direct access to this connection. The other, we call it here 15% with the 300 meters. And these are, you have seen some of the pictures that they're part of the potable water that is being placed in different locations. 5% by truck. And there is another 5% that they don't have potable water service. I heard one of my colleagues who mentioned that is 50% of water losses in the Cuban system. That, at least the research that I made, that data goes back to 1960. I look at the data of the report that was prepared, and it is about 85% of the pump water, and especially, I believe this is in the area that is delivered to the customers rather than the agricultural or industrial. Imagine that you produce 100 gallons of water a day, and you are only able to deliver 15. This is totally inefficient. Just to give you an idea of what is industry standards in the United States, it's the other way around. You produce 100, you deliver 85%. This is totally and absolutely inefficient. And here comes my editorial, my department, Miami-Dade Water and Sewer. You're representing mainly the Cuban American Association of Civil Engineers, but my department do an excellent work on this. Our standard is we deliver 90% of the water. We lost about 10%. The losses, what are they attributed to? I mean, the main distribution system and the water service. This is where the leaking is. So we need to make, I mean, when I say we need to make, in Cuba they need to make a serious improvement in this area. Potable water. I mean, I think you have discussed this. It's marginal at best. I mean, the majority of the people who receive water in Cuba, they have to boil the water. I mean, they cannot drink unless they boil the water. Some aspect that I believe no one here has discussed. When a utility company